Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhodes on the Buy Here Pay Here morning show. Take it away, you two.
Hey.
Hello, friends. Welcome to a Saturday broadcast. Got some big stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Just on the personal note, just wrapping up a week with your brother's visit. That's been nice.
Came out to check out Guyman and do some Guyman things.
Yeah, got it. And among the things he figured out we could do here in Guyman is play bad golf. So we played. we played yesterday. We were exhausted by the time we finished and playing pretty poorly.
But it was their second day in a row of playing 18.
Yeah.
And,
I've never done that. And I know
John
I probably won't do it again.
Was like, I've done 36 on one day and another 18 the next day. And it's like, good.
Yeah. But we were both pretty mentally checked out by the time we got to the second nine yesterday.
I went to go play Mahjong with the girls.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. All good. Yeah.
Did that. We're right after the Buy Here Pay Here United conference,
right.
And had heard good things about how everything went, and
for sure.
And I hope that those of you who were there traveled home safely and took a lot of notes and are now ready to implement all of the things.
Yeah.
And that is like where a lot of dealers just kind of. We've talked to so many dealers that they're like, we go to the conference, we take all these notes, and we have all these great intentions. And then next year, when it's time to get ready to go to the next conference, they run across their journals of all the notes that they've taken. And it's just like, well, So implementation is like a super important part of doing conferences. And so I shameless plug. If you need help implementing some of the things that you learned, feel free to give us a call.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So among the things they probably talked about was sales and down payments, which will be our subject for today. We're going to talk about, in particular, and forgive me, I'm going to try to get on this microphone better because I know when I move around a bit, it fades on us. But this down payment subject, is something always comes up. And obviously, having been around it a long time, this is not a new conversation. This is something that comes up quite a bit. Came up most recently in our V8 meetings, mostly because I raised the question and we bounced it around and heard from some very experienced dealers.
And we've heard from, there is a multitude of schools of thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing we do know about the dealers in the Buy Here Pay Here space is they're highly they're just like they're highly entrepreneur, can kind of be called mavericks, because it's like they figure it out. They get in the trenches, they dig out the holes that they need to have dug out, and get their system working. And every system is a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. And I think the data pool we're going to look at today is going to show evidence of that, like very visually show some evidence of the differences in the way people do business. I think the main premise for today is kind of coming back to this conversation. If you talk to a dealer who says, and I've heard this plenty, you'll be working with somebody who's a mentor or somebody who's had many years of experience, and they will say sometimes that more down payment translates into a better performing loan, or whatever phrasing they might choose. Like the more down payment you can get, the better. And obviously there's scoring systems out there. One of the things we talked about in our meeting on Thursday was scoring systems and how they sort of weight the down payment in the underwriting process. So it's all an ongoing thread.
It really is. And some of the people that we have had really rich conversations with that are not dealers, but people that collect data. Historically, tax time season is a time where people get high payments, high down payments. And historically, those notes that are written during a tax return season have a higher probability of defaulting.
Default. Yeah. Yeah. So, we've heard that anecdotally. We haven't
Mhm.
studied that exactly in our V8. We're now 27 months of data with many of our
Mhm.
members. And that's mostly the data that I brought today is
Mhm.
I selected the dealers that one, we had a data all the way back to inception in January of 2024. So
Mhm.
I need to say, for the sake of everything that you're going to look at today, is driven off of that 27-month window.
Mhm.
And beyond that, most everything is driven off of a 3-month rolling average.
Mhm.
So in other words, you have 24 months worth of a 3-month rolling average. So it's really valuable data. I think it's a small pool in terms of the number of dealers,
Mhm.
but one of the things I want to put on the screen here is that first of all, the pool size that we're working with for today represents over 8,400 sales. For those not seeing the screen, this is part of what we try to
This is
do.
$115 million worth of
Originations or
Mhm.
contracts. So
Mhm.
this is when we say small pool, it's a sizable pool in terms of the number of contracts analyzed across
Mhm.
27 months. It's a small pool in terms of the number of dealers that it represents. So,
Mhm.
relatively small. But if you're a single dealer, by the way, if you're tuned in today,
Mhm.
please keep your cell phone handy. If you're watching on a cell phone, then find a way to snap photos, screenshots,
Yeah.
because I've got about 3 things that I want to make sure that folks who are tuned in today, if you're not a member of our V8 dealer group, one of the things I want them to snap a photo of is our QR code for joining a V8 group, because when they see some of the data that we're going to talk about today,
Mhm.
I think they'll get a sense of what can be gained by being part of these conversations and what we have a chance to learn. The other thing I want to share is that a lot of the portfolio conversion rates, and I've explained this a number of times, but I'll say it again, that what I call conversion rate is just really the rate at which portfolios convert to cash. So
Mhm.
others might call that a liquidation rate, but that's really what we're referring to. And in this case, I leaned on the dealers who most of the assumptions, the financial assumptions
Mhm.
we're going to look at today are driven off of our groups that have 100 to 500 accounts.
Which is your average
Yeah.
dealer.
Yeah, that's typical, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah, we certainly based on what we see in terms of the
Mhm.
participation in V8 and so on. But that's just be aware. That's most of what we're going to be
Mhm.
talking about. And, I have challenged in the past, Michelle, folks who talk data and talk about these things, especially business model strategy. Like people are banking their business model and they're working hard every day based on a certain strategy. And I think when we talk about strategies, we need to not talk about it flippantly. We need to
Mhm.
make sure we're as specific as possible. So that's what we've done today, is just dig in and give very concrete information.
Yeah.
And I came at it with just, the idea that we're going to work from valid data, and we're going to look at whatever the data tells us.
Mhm.
And so we just kind of looked at what does the data support
Mhm.
in terms of these ideas that more down payment suggest, a better loan performance.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I mean, one of the reasons why Jim brings me along is, I think differently.
Besides the fact that you're cute. Go
Oh,
ahead.
thank you. It's better than looking at a blank screen across from you. That I have a different way of viewing a lot of these things.
Mhm.
One is that I don't like women or men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Maybe
heard
that
that.
could be part of it. I haven't spent my career in this industry,
Right.
and so I kind of look at it from a different
Sure.
perspective. And I'm a bit woo. So and that's where it's like I'm looking. A lot of times I will look at these things through the lens of the human experience,
Yeah.
and like the plight of people,
Right.
and the more human feeling squiggly line side.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that we will get into today, because
But
we
I
have another.
will try to just keep
Yeah,
myself held back. Just
no,
so
it's
that
fine.
you know.
I just think we might have an expanded conversation later
Yeah.
around what this data might mean,
Yeah.
because I think there's quite a bit for us to talk about today around what the data tells us,
Mhm.
right? Like what can we actually see in the results? And
Mhm.
so I think probably the first thing I need to do is share, just to give folks a feel for where this information is coming from.
Mhm.
Give me just a minute, because I have to share this thing
Mhm.
individually. So one moment, I'll get this done on my side, and then you can.
I didn't prepare something to fill the silence with.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
sorry.
You want to sing a little song? Let's get this. Let me get this thing
Okay.
shared. All right.
Oh, my
So
goodness. Okay,
yeah, I
there you
know.
go.
Let me actually get the other one. So these are the assumptions that we're working with. And so I mentioned that this is our groups that have 100 to 500 accounts. And when I talk about conversion rates, I mentioned that earlier. Everything you're going to see today is driven off of these numbers. Do you see my cursor, Michelle? Where
I do.
Okay, so those numbers there are the ones that we're going to be leaning on as we drive the portfolio. Okay. So the other thing I want to pause and say, so I don't forget to say it later, is that I chose in this modeling to lock down virtually every variable except 2. And so we'll get to that.
Okay.
And so I think it's important to remember that there are two numbers that we're going to toggle here. And but I'm choosing to lock the others in place because you just get too many moving parts and the data becomes meaningless. So so this is what I'm trying to present here today. So there are some key numbers. This is one of the things I was going to urge people to screenshot, because if you're not a member of a V8 group, these are averages. Okay, this is not like a what a 20 group would call a benchmark. This is a group average. So I think it's usually this particular pool is number of dealers would be in the teams that are driving these averages. Okay, so this becomes what drives the numbers. So I'm looking at the 6-month average. You can see up here, this is actually from March of 2026. So this is our most recent 6-month average. We're recording this in April of 26. So let me just show you. This is the cash flow modeling tool that you've seen me use plenty. I brought this to the podcast in the past. This is what I use when I'm working with a new dealer. And I would say, let's be careful not to get too bogged down in any of the numbers that you're seeing kind of on the perimeter. What I'd look at is these numbers in yellow are the assumptions that I've got loaded in here. And the reason this becomes important is because these assumptions drive the rest of what happens back here. I'll take folks into these individual sheets, but first I would just want to make sure that people can see.
Let's just talk a little bit about the assumptions. And these are based on
the numbers I just showed.
Too. So,
the numbers I just showed, right?
So the purchase price for the dealer is around 7,100.
It's exactly 7,700, 7,702.
I have my glasses, but apparently
so for those not seeing the screen, the number is 7,702 is the average recondition cost for our dealers in V8 based on a 6-month average.
Reconditioning, the purchase and reconditioning, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then the sales price is just a little bit over 15.5 or 14.5.
14.5. So 14,511 is our actual 6-month average in our V8 groups. So again, a large data pool there that's driving these numbers. So, and I also adjusted the add-ons to make sure that the average amount financed came out to be exactly what our group average is. Okay, so just trying to help everybody understand we're doing the best we can to make sure that we drive stuff that's exactly.
So that's an important thing, that these are based on a lot of contracts. These are based on a lot of time, and so this is the average. So those of you who are not a member of V8 group, or might be watching for the first time, this is what your average buy here, pay here dealer is going to be experiencing as like what their costs are in, and what their costs are, or what their sell price is. And so I think also, I don't mean to squirrel too much. For those that are listening that are potentially new to buy here, pay here, or aren't in buy here, pay here, that these to understand, especially if you are new, or like a customer type of thing, that when you come and buy a car from a dealer, they are putting a lot of risk on the road too. So I mean, it's based on your down payment, and what dealers will do is the down payment they feel is like decreasing their risk on the road. So that was my so that's what that risk number is up there. We've got the average cash and deal over here, which Michelle alluded to. Cash and deal for most dealers is reflected there somewhere. I'm not seeing it at the moment, but we've got it certainly in there's the calculated cash and deal right there, 60/35. So that's where that number drives from. But what this does is it drives some numbers that I chose to measure, and then I'm going to go over and we're going to
So let's just go through these. This single month right here, I've got those laid out in a separate sheet. But what I've done is I've taken this scenario and I made adjustments to two numbers. I adjusted the average down payment that you see there, and then I adjusted the volume. You and I talked about this morning because I just wanted to pick some numbers that we felt like would be reasonable projections and reasonable adjustments to a business model. So that's all we're doing. It's
so
just
like the average down payment, that is based on the average, a lot of averages of the numbers that are out there. And, you know, of course, you're going to see some that are substantially lower and you're going to see some that are substantially higher, but this is kind of like the average amount.
So yeah, this is actual results of actual dealers. So that's what we're seeing on the screen currently. Now, what I want you to see then is I've got a separate model teed up over here, which is the same, all other assumptions locked down. And then I changed just the volume.
So a volume, just the volume?
I changed the volume. I changed the average down payment. We'll get to that. Okay. So I changed. So you see on the screen now with a count of 20.
Okay. So an average, and that's a pretty average amount for people to sell.
So 20.
It's 20 units a month.
But I think the critical part here is that all I've done is adjust the down payment from about 1,700. We were at 1,667,
which again is the average.
Right.
About.
And so now I'm adjusting that manually. I'm just saying if we adjusted that average down payment to 1,200, this is just scenarios.
400 downs or 400 less. What kind of percentage?
Almost 500, just small percentage. But we're really just trying to say, and I think most dealers can hear this and say, if I took a little less down payment, if you just look through all your applications and how many customers, you know, do we miss on a given month because we're holding out for a certain down payment based on our model and our strategy. So, you know, obviously I'll say it now again, so I don't forget, we understand that capital constraints are going to be a factor here. Sometimes dealers are doing what they do because that's what they can afford to do. And if capital is the constraint, then that's what's going to keep us from doing things differently potentially, right? But I think what we want to be able to illustrate today is a couple of things that I looked at and kind of measuring these things was, let me get over here and show you these different numbers. So now here you've got them both stacked side by side. And so what it does is it gives the results where you can see that, again, this one in column B is based on the actual averages from our dealers. One thing I didn't show specifically, and I better hop back over there and make sure folks see this. The drivers back here are really critical. These are numbers that are the actual assumptions that I showed at the bottom of the conversion rates. These are the actual conversion rates that our dealers are experiencing. Okay, so what that says is as we finance notes and we put them in the portfolio, this is the rate at which we can expect them to produce. Principal that we collect, principal that we charge off, interest that we recover or that we collect, and then repos that we recover. So that's really important math that drives, and we use that in a lot of our modeling, that methodology to drive forecasts. So when I have those conversion rates loaded here, I have it for both scenarios and I kept those numbers the same. One other thing I don't want to forget to mention is that in this modeling, I chose to keep the customer's payment the same. Some dealers would say, well, if I'm taking less down payment, I'm going to want to see the customer pay more. Well, if the customer can afford that, fine. But if the customer can afford that, why didn't we charge the other customer with more down payment? You know, the same. So what I would really say is for this modeling, I kept the payment the same, which means what? Our terms a little bit longer, just a little bit longer. So all I'm really doing is keeping the customer's payment the same, operating on the idea the customer's application's the same, their income's the same. I just locked in the payment amount and all we've done is adjust the down payment that we accept on the day of delivery.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and it's like, I want to back up because I was talking about 20 as an average. 16 is the average.
Correct.
20 is, we're just looking for 4 more units a month.
And I'm saying that based on if I adjusted that down payment to 1,200. Again, these are the only variables. That area you see in green, these are the only 2 levers that we're adjusting.
And only you, the dealers that are listening, know what deals you turned away. And so, you know, if you can look back on your history from the last 2 or 3 months and
Right.
see, if I decreased it by this much, and we're able to sell those other units, this is kind of giving you an illustration of what that means over a little bit of time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I also let's pause a minute and talk about something that just anecdotally across my career. And let's go backwards from there. Like Thursday night of this week, we had a dealer who's very successful, been in business almost 20 years. He was able to share with the group. He's really very much like a mentor in this group, more years of experience, larger portfolio, good performance numbers. And the dealer shared that they ask for all the down payment. They'll ask for 20, 30% of the selling price for a down payment. And then they negotiate and they end up, what do you got to work with? And then they make a yes or no decision based on whatever the customer's got to work with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that is something that does require a human element and not a, or like a flexible human element. Because when we are boxed in based on algorithms and softwares and all of those kind of things, of like, this is a no, this is a yes.
Yeah.
It's that human element can make a big difference.
Yeah. And then also we had another dealer appear with us on the podcast once upon a time. We won't say the name here, but we had a dealer who appeared who had one of the lowest down payments in our portfolio of dealers, in our V8 groups, yet they have some of the strongest collections results. Now we have some understanding of what was going on there, but they were kind of anomalous in that they had this tremendous collection rate, right? But you could see that their average down payment that they actually collected from the customer at delivery was lowest also in the group.
What it was?
The number, it averaged $400 or something. It was a very, very low. And I just know that part of the reason that was the case is because in that case, that dealer had the customer reserve cash because they had to use their own cash. The customer had to use their own cash to go do some of their plate transfers and whatever. So that was part of the reason. And in a lot of states, the dealer would have collected that from the customer and handled those transfers and plates themselves. So that's part of the reason this dealer didn't see as much down payment at delivery. But the plate still got transferred. Customer put less down out of their pocket, and the deal still performed exceedingly well. So I think that's another anecdote. And then one more, going way back when I started. I remember working with a very, very successful dealer, multiple locations, had a sizable portfolio. And I remember them saying to a room in one of our conferences that we hosted that he said, we just kind of try to look past the down payment. And I think that's such an important phrase to consider here. And it's really what we're not necessarily lobbying for anything as much as we're showing the math about when we can get comfortable with the idea of looking past the customer's down payment today, or being prepared to adapt our model just a little bit in the interest of confirming that the other data that I'm going to share here is going to show that we really have we have enough data here to support this idea that you really got, you've got to make the case to me based on what I see in our data. You've got to be able to make the case to me. If you say to me, more down payment leads to better loan performance. There's so many ways we can track loan performance. You can look at severity. You can look at frequency. There's just math after math, right? I chose for today, I looked at two things. I chose to look at down payment as a percentage of the selling price, because obviously selling prices vary. And instead of looking at 500 down versus 1,500 down, I just said, if the down payment, I didn't look at the cost of the car. I'm not really looking at cash and deal. I'm just saying, if the down payment I have today as a customer, if we just look at it from the customer side, my down payment as a percentage of the price of the car that I'm buying, that's my commitment as a customer, right? Yes. So if we look at that, and then the other number I chose to look at on the collection side to decide what would I pick if I was going to say, what's an indication that the portfolio is doing well or not doing well? We have lots. We look at, several different indicators, and they'll kind of tell a little different story, but I picked one today, and the one I picked was the percentage, the rate at which we collect principal versus the rate that we charge off principal. Okay. So
Yeah.
I really heard people talk about that. I don't know what you might want to call that ratio, but I'm just going to say it again. What the measurement is the amount of principal collected, and again, across, 27 months of data here, the amount of principal collected versus the amount of principal charged off. That's the indicator that I chose to say, what's the correlation between down payment as a percentage versus how well the portfolio yields principal, right? How much are we collecting versus how much are we losing to charge off? So let me take folks inside the data. We have 9 dealers representing that. What was the number? 14 million? No, it was 150 million. We'll find it again. I've got it right here. 115. Yeah, 115 million. I see it on our banners there. But so I've got the same information to show graphically, but I just kind of wanted to show you the table. The way I approached this is I had it rank the dealers in terms of their down payment rank being the highest percentage of selling price. Okay. So you can see that these dealers range from about 12.75%, again, across a very long data pool, down to about 7.5%.
So, okay. This is the percentage of the sales price that they typically collect.
Right.
Okay.
And now if you look at that though, you can see over here that, dealer number 1 who collects the highest percentage of down is also the highest collector at 3.5%. They collect a high multiple of their charge-offs, which is great. However, it starts to break down as you kind of come down the track here. Dealer number 2, who has the next highest percentage of down payment collected, falls to number 8 in terms of their collection results. Okay. And then so on. Dealer number 3 is in number 2 position. Number 4 is a number. So they're mixed here. But if you look down here, like at the bottom, dealer number 9, who's the lowest of the down payments,
is right in the middle.
Is in the middle.
Yeah,
like there's just nothing there that tells me that. So let me show it graphically. Let's do this one instead. So this is the same data that I just showed, but in a graph. And this is presented kind of different. This is Claude, by the way. I'm running this data through AI, and Claude is generating some of these results that you're seeing visually. But the blue bar, you can see the blue bar is the ranking of the percentage of down payment. But then you can see there's no correlation there. Again,
okay, so
if you just look at the green relative to the blue, the blue indicates the rank of the dealer's down payment percentage. Okay, with this being this is the best deal. The short blue bar is actually the best, rank number 1
of the
down payment.
Lowest down payment.
No, the highest down payment. They get the highest down payment. Okay. But then if you look at that, then you start to see the charge-off results. So that the green is going to indicate the actual charge-off information. So I think it becomes, and let me just show one more. It's a different way to show the same thing. And this is one you might want to snap a photo of, because I think we need to study this one. I certainly had to study it a minute to make sure I could get in my head what the quadrants represented. But when you see hopefully you can see that graph well enough to see the dotted lines there that divide the quadrant. And what it's saying is this is average collections. The horizontal bar is average collections. So in other words, the ones down here would be below average, and everything above the line would be above average collection. Okay. Obviously,
so there's only 2 dealers that are above average.
These 2 are skewing the average even. Most of these dealers are falling down in this range. But now this vertical bar is going to be your average down payment.
Okay, so the lower down payments are going to be to your left.
Right.
The higher down payments are going to be to your right.
Yeah. So this upper right-hand quadrant says these are the dealers that are high average down and high average collections.
Okay.
Just got 2.
Okay.
In that fall in that bucket. So based on that information alone, if you look at the red, you could say, well, for the 2 dealers that are in that green quadrant, we have 3 dealers that are in the red. They're above average down, but they're below on collections, right? So you'll study this and it'll start to make sense to you as you kind of analyze the data in there. But essentially what I would conclude from looking at this is there's no strong correlation here. any correlation that we would have is pretty weak.
Okay, so yes, I get that. I totally get that. It's like all over the place.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem to be down payments do not seem to be a differentiating factor to success of the loan at all.
Based on this pool.
Squirrel.
Okay.
I really would love to dive deep into the business models of both Florida 2 and Pennsylvania 1.
Yeah. And when you say their business models, you probably mean, I was thinking about business approach, philosophy, what kind of methods they use. You'd like to know.
Because the down payment is like, how are they achieving a higher down payment? So what is their methodology around receiving a higher down payment? And then again, what are their practices? What is their methodology around collections? Because they seem to have two pretty important pieces dialed in for themselves.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
Let me get back to the spreadsheet, because I think the real important math is over here, because now that we understand kind of what we're working with, and we understand that, the math doesn't support the premise that higher down payment means better portfolio performance based on the indicators that Jim chose. All right. So if I take that information and I go back over here and so if I accept that premise and I were to adjust my model a little bit and just say, I'm going to take a little less down payment. So back to these numbers, I'm going to take 1,200 down instead of 17. And we just kind of kept it conservative and said, if that just translated into 4 more sales a month, how does that look? And let's go line by line here, Michelle. Let's go. So now our total down payment that we're collecting from customers in scenario 1 over here is $26,600, and it's $24,000.
So you're about $2,600
less down payment
of cash
that we're
coming
collecting.
in. So again, if you have capital constraints, that may mean an awful lot to you. Don't know.
Cash and deal policy will be a big driver.
Yeah.
But so I think the bigger part is we have $24,000 in scenario 2 to go replace now $154,000 we have to spend to replace the 20 cars that we sold.
Yeah.
Now our gross profit is up, paper profit. We have now instead of 108. For those not seeing the screen, I'll try to read these numbers out loud for you. But the gross profit in scenario 1 is call it 109,000, and in scenario 2 at a volume of 20 is 136,000. Average cash and deal goes from about 60.35 to 65.02 because we're up 300 some odd dollars, and then the months to break out is about 1 month longer. That it takes us to recover our risk. Go ahead, Michelle.
So this is also just a single month. And so you start to compound that. And if I know.
Yeah. No, yeah.
But I'm like, if you've got the ability to have access to capital to replace your inventory, So, and there's a lot of different ways of doing that, but that's like in just one single month, that's about $30,000 more.
What are you looking at?
Or, that your gross
cost
profit.
of replacing inventory?
The gross profit. It's like $30,000 more that you now have on your portfolio.
And listen, profitability matters. So part of how we're gaining that profit is
every month that just
And we didn't change our profit when we adjusted our down payment. The down payment is just how the customer pays for the car. The down payment or the gross profit per deal remains the same, and so we're simply increasing our volume. So again, we're looking just at kind of a single month and how that breaks down. Now let's go down to how this really translates to the business when we start to sell 20 instead of 16. And by the way, I don't want to forget to say that my dealers have heard me talk about this in our V8 environment, where part of this is decided based on capacity, what I call capacity. If I'm a dealer who has the personnel and the real estate and the ability to flow and generate a volume of 20 sales, and I'm only doing 16, then that begs the question right off the bat, is if I'm underutilizing my capacity, isn't
Mhm.
that potentially a problem? So I think our podcast today ends up becoming a pretty good advertising clip for capital providers, because I think what you're about to see is that when we move that needle in terms of volume, especially if we have the capacity, if we're not having to increase our overhead to produce those extra 4 sales a month in our example, then what is the outcome, right? So let's go through that. If we did that in month number 1, our payments coming in alone in month number 2 would be, instead of 8,300 on those 16 sales, our payments are going to be about 10,300. Okay. Now, at the end of year 1, if we continued on that clip, selling 20 instead of 16, instead of having 1.862 in the portfolio, this is just principal, we would have 2.4. Okay. So that's just receivables. That doesn't help us much of anything, except it might impact our borrowing capacity or whatever. But
it's not money in the bank, but it's
right. It's paper receivables. Now, at month 13, you'd be getting P&I payments. This shifts over at month 13. We're using those portfolio numbers that I hopped over to month number 13 and said, this would be the yield off of the portfolio in 13 months.
And is this if you're compounding every month 4 more?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So you instead of adding 16 contracts to the portfolio each month, you're adding 20. So that just obviously that drives the portfolio size. So we don't look at it in terms of number of accounts driving a number of payments. We start to shift it into, this is how much principal we have in the portfolio at the close of month X, and that tells us how much money we should be bringing in the next month. Okay. So now that says that we're going to be bringing in again 127 monthly at the 13-month mark. Our year 5 notes receivable will have, at the close of 5 years, following the same model all the way through, instead of having 3.16 at the end of 5 years, we would have 4.08.
So in 5 years of just adding that much more, you're increasing. I don't know what percentages are, but $1 million.
Yeah. And I think the cash flow too, this is, I'll jump down here because what I looked at is, there's a lot of different ways, and it kind of gets out of order here. But if you look at your year 2 cash flow, so if I just, for the first 12 months, I do 20 instead of 16. Okay. At year 2, instead of bringing in 1.747, I'm going to bring in 2.256. Okay, so that's pretty substantial.
That is pretty substantial.
So now the question becomes, from a capital perspective, is like, how much more could we borrow, draw? Which is another thing we do in our V8 environment, is we calculate kind of the what do I call it? Basically the capital demand. Like, do you have the performance to support a line of credit? So it's like, this is part of what would be important math to help that. From a gross profit standpoint, in year 1, if we're doing 16, we'd have 1.275, and our this is adjusted gross profit, which factors in charge-off.
Well, like the average amount of charge-offs that you have.
It's just basically using those same conversion rates to say, this is how much dealers are charging off. This is how much principal they're collecting, et cetera. So what it says is, when we factor in adjusted gross profit, for those not familiar, we've talked about it on the podcast a few times, but adjusted gross profit is really just all of the kind of what you might call the front end profit from your business before operating expenses. So in a buy here, pay here, it's probably more than front end, because you have basically the profit from sales, you have the interest that you collect, and then minus net charge-offs is really going to give you your net charge-off. That's kind of everything that happens in your buy here, pay here operation before expenses. Okay. So in this scenario, you would have, instead of 1.275, you'd have a 1.59. So again, allowing for charge-off. And we're taking more risk. Our cash and deal in year 1, we need about another $450,000, it looks like, in order to produce those extra 4 sales times 12 months, so this is, you're going to consume more cash. Yes. Getting a little less down payment, and you're selling more. So you're going to consume more cash. So we got to make sure we can afford to do that. We got the capital to be able to capitalize that strategy. But I think what you're seeing is the impact of that is, now we're bringing in, the difference between in month 13 alone, we're bringing in 127 versus 98 in principal and interest. And so you can see how the money comes back. We just got to make sure that, and so look, I know that people watch this and think, well, you're not allowing for the fact that charge-offs could be going up. Well, the reason I'm not allowing for it is because our data doesn't support that. I'm just not.
That's an interesting thing that I really appreciate that we've seen in the last few years. Just a lot of this. It's obviously not COVID, but we've seen an awful lot of that, and you hear anecdotally and on social media and things where they're like crying, it's a bad time, this and this, and so you're basically saying based on the numbers, and that's really numbers don't lie.
Yeah,
they don't lie. And so you can have a feeling around something,
right,
all you want, but the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like, I'm not trying to, here comes my woo, I'm not trying to say your feelings don't matter.
Yeah.
But when I
made a switch, and I was trying to find that QR code, and I killed the whole thing.
I will do that for you. But yeah, it does make a difference. Now, for listeners that are not necessarily in the industry, because we do get those.
Yeah.
We have family members that listen and they're like, I didn't understand the word you said,
why.
but but it's so we can say we collected that much, but that doesn't mean that's what our gain is for the year.
Say that again.
So we can say over the course of 5 years, we've collected this much.
Oh, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that's what your gain is.
That lands in your pocket.
That lands in your pocket because you have an operation to continue running,
of course,
and inventory to
Right.
put back in, and all of the different things. And so when you look at like there's a lot of money running through this kind of a business, but that doesn't mean all of that money is landing into the pocket of the dealer.
Right.
It's a pretty big and thirsty ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's obviously angles off of all of this, but I think we've covered the parts to me that were most significant. And I would just challenge anybody who, has this belief that they're just bring us the math. If you believe that your math supports a different, and I would just say that, if it's your own individual data, then obviously you have to allow for your own operational approach, your philosophy in collections, the number of team members you have. I mean, there can be variation from operation to operation in terms of how these numbers look. But if if somebody's got a larger data pool, I'll invite them. We can have this conversation and dig into it, because at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is give dealers access to the right information so that they can be sure that they've, got good information to make decisions. This is a challenging business, and this is an especially challenging time for dealers. They're, and I think where you were going earlier is, if in fact we're in some sort of a recession, we know for sure gas prices are up. We know that, the dealers or consumers are struggling. And so
this is where my feely stuff comes in. Yeah.
All right. Well, I would say, irrespective of the feely stuff, just simple mathematics say, if we have a number of consumers in our market that are struggling, and it kind of goes back to the way I've said it to dealers early on, is like when I'm working with a dealer who's brand new, and I've said this to dealers throughout my career, and a given market, if we're going to help a dealer set up a dealership in Dubuque, Iowa, you could sit in the middle of Dubuque, Iowa, and you could draw a circle and say, there are X number of customers in this circle that can do 2,000 down in a poor credit situation. But if I say, how many customers are in the market that could afford 1,000 down? Well, that's a much bigger pie, right? That's so it's really the math really applies here. So it's really from a pure mathematics and strategy standpoint.
Yeah.
Because I know you're going to the place about compassion and working with people.
My thing is your level of economically challenged has really not an awful lot to do with your ability or your, responsibility to pay things.
Yeah.
Because, people, it's like ebbs and flows, and everyone is just really, really,
Yeah.
everyone is feeling the pinch.
Right.
Those of us who have more cushion
Mhm.
don't feel it as much, but we do feel it.
Okay.
I mean, I look at food prices, gas prices, good example with all the stuff that's happening. Gas prices are, and so we're like, oh, we'll have to pay an extra $50. I mean, we just filled up our car just the other day, and Jim was like, that was this much, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Now, for a lot of people that are more economically challenged, that's like a make or break. Are we buying milk this week?
Yeah, could be.
That kind of thing. And so my premise is if we can make our model work and not allowing more bandwidth for our customers,
Right.
not allowing, I mean, it's like, I have a little bit of a challenge with get as much as you can. Just get as much as you can.
Well, when you're managing cash bank accounts and whatever, I can see where it comes from. I think all we're trying to really suggest here is when you can make minor adjustments to your business model and you can make your services more attainable. And you can look past the down payment, as that dealer that I talked about from 20 plus years ago. I need to start saying almost 30 years because I started in this business as a coach in 2000. But basically what I'm saying is when you can look past the down payment and say, does this customer meet our conditions otherwise? Because if I'm asking them to step into a 3-year note, I think it makes sense for us to be more focused on what's the likelihood of this customer being successful across 36 months than the amount of money they have in their pocket today. So if I look at their stability, their income, the payment ratio, and those kind of things, and then of course down payment's going to matter. I'm not saying down payment doesn't matter, but it's when we can adjust our model to allow our financing to become more attainable, then we have the chance to increase our volume, which may still be within our capacity. And now we just have to look at where does the math take us? What will our business look like in year 2 and year 3 when we make that adjustment? And so I think, again, if you think, well, if the premise is those loans aren't going to perform as well, I'm just going to say, just prove it to me, please. Just come back and prove it, because that's just not what our data says.
And so the data is showing that having more down payment is not about loan performance. It's you're not going to get better loan performance. You're just getting more down.
Based on this data pool.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there are other data pools. I'm just saying our data pool doesn't show that premise. If you just have somebody,
love to see other people's data pools that are, I mean, not just a single dealer, because I know that there are dealers out there that have been tracking for decades, but like a pool of 30 dealers that are out there. It's like, because it is true, like you've shown, that there are outliers.
Right.
There are those that has been, they have a high down payment and they collect better.
Right.
Don't know if those two are the same thing, but they do collect pretty well. So it's numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
Numbers don't lie.
We gotta just kind of lean on the numbers until we have something to the contrary, right? So I think that's where we're at, and I appreciate folks tuning in. I would say that let's just keep the conversation going. We'd love to have you get in one of our V8 dealer groups. I'll close with a shameless plug, please, if you're not. For sure.
It really helps people. So.
Yeah. So so I said it was shameless.
Okay,
so
there should be no shame in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we'd love to have you in a V8 dealer group. This is these are where the rich conversations happen, and people learn from one another.
One of the biggest things is like dealers teaching dealers.
Yeah.
And if you're having
when you can sit in the group with this dealer and ask them the question, how do you do that? And why so little down payment, right? And find out how theirs works, right?
All right. Well, hey, everybody, thanks again for joining. It's a Saturday. Thanks for joining us on YouTube. We appreciate that. And yeah, hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back next week with another fun topic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Have a good day, guys. Enjoy your weekend.